Welcome to the social roundup with Sala right here on Relax Radio. And we are here to talk about something very interesting today and very much needed. A conversation that, we have been avoiding, or, even when we don't avoid it, sometimes what we tend to do is not acknowledge it, right? Which is exactly why we need to be taking the time to talk about it, to address it, and to do whatever is in our power to fix it, right? So that is exactly what we're going to be doing here, right here on Relax Radio for the next hour. So we're excited to have you join in on this conversation as well. So do feel free to comment. Do feel free to let us know what we could possibly do to fix this situation as well. Meanwhile, you can comment on our Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitch as well. We'd also love to know what you think about the discussions we have right here in general, and what you would love to hear from us, what you would love for us to talk about and engage in these conversations with us. Tell us what your experiences are as well. With that being said, we're going into something very, very interesting right now and much needed, which is racism. Something that is very common in our society, something that is within our systems, and we have been ignorant for the longest time about it. It is something that dates back to a long time before, and it is something that we need to be doing something about. So let's see what racism is, right? Now, when it comes to racism, it is something that cannot be said, this is exactly what it means, because there are different forms it takes and there are different extents to which it could possibly go as well. But in general, it is, prejudice, discrimination, and hatred directed towards someone based on their color, ethnicity, and national origin as well. So, racism, in very, very simple terms, is exactly that, right? And we tend to not even realize that we're being racist towards people sometimes, and it is something that we need to talk about and discuss and realize, well, this is exactly what is happening, right? People often associate racism with the acts of abuse and harassment, which is exactly why sometimes minor forms of being racist, very, very minute things that we do that could possibly be racist, tend to get ignored in the process, right? However, we need to understand that, regardless of what it may be, we are all going to have some sort of, bias, internalized unconscious bias that is there within us, that we need to be addressing, right? And we need to be taking whatever action we should be taking to address this situation overall, right? And sometimes, even name calling and jokes, a lot of people talk about humor and they say, you know what, it's just a joke, take it lightly, it's just a word, it's not a big deal. But we need to understand the severity of using a word that has been used to discriminate a certain group, certain community, or even with jokes, what exactly are we saying? Are we being sensitive to the people around us? Is it something to desensitize? Is it something that you can joke about? So these are things that we need to think about when it comes to racism, right? And we need to understand that ultimately we have to check ourselves and make sure that we're not being discriminatory towards people, and that we're not showing hatred, we're not pushing hatred towards other communities as well, right? Overall, racism can be revealed through people's actions as well as their attitudes towards the general public, right? It can also be reflected through systems and institutions. Certain countries, certain policies that they implement within their countries could also be racist as well. So we need to make sure that we're doing whatever is in our power to change this about our system and our people as well. But sometimes, see, now the case is that sometimes it may not be revealed at all. Now, overall, even though our attitudes and actions can sometimes be as obvious as someone screaming in the bus at someone, showing some sort of hatred towards their color or their ethnicity or their national origin, sometimes it isn't the case where someone is basically showing that hatred. It can be not revealed at all. Racism is not always obvious. Sometimes it could just be something that is as simple as looking through a list of job applicants and seeing that someone is of a different ethnicity group, someone has a name that is not too common to you, someone has a name that you can't pronounce, and then you decide to not interview them, which is ultimately really sad. Because I personally think that when it comes to jobs, when you're applying for a job, we shouldn't be sending a picture or a name. Because I personally think that when someone sees your skills, what sort of person you are, what you have done, what sort of experience you come with, that is exactly what they should be judging you based on, and not how you look, not your physical appearance, or not your name, right? So it is something to think about. This is a time in which racism racism cannot be obvious to the eye, because someone could see a picture and decide to not interview them simply because they're not fond of that race, or they do not know how to pronounce their name, right? Which are also racist situations, right? We need to understand ultimately that racism is not just words, it's in the beliefs, it's in the actions of people, and all these things could decide whether this person is being racist or not, right? It includes all the barriers that prevent our society from enjoying dignity and equality because of their race. And that is really sad, because why exactly do we have a problem with this? Why are we so caught up in this idea of being racist towards people just because they are different to us? Aren't we supposed to get excited by the idea that people are different? Everyone is different in this world. Aren't we supposed to embrace the fact that we're all different from each other? Why exactly are we suffering with this? Why exactly are we, pushing away the differences? Why do we all want to be the same? Is it just me? Because, like, I sometimes think like this, right? When I buy a top, when I go shopping, and if I've seen someone else wear it, it like really bothers me. I don't want to wear the same thing someone else has worn, right? I want to look different. And when I see someone else wear another top, I get excited about it, right? And I'm just using a very, very simple example, right? And in that case, I personally think that, being different from each other is exactly what we want. But when it comes to race, when it comes to ethnicity, when it comes to how we look, why do we want to people to be the same way we are, right? It is something to think about, it is something to ponder over, and it is something that we need to discuss and bring to people's attention ultimately, right? And now we'll sort of also be going into the history of racism and where exactly all of this started as well, because before we talk about eradicating or getting rid of racism from our society, we need to understand why exactly racism exists within our society, right? Racism is also something that is more commonly called racialism. Racialism is what is more commonly called racism within our society, right? And ultimately, this is not just, something that came yesterday. It is not something that we have been sort of, living with, something that popped up yesterday or day before. It is something that has been there for centuries. When I say centuries, racism has existed for centuries, and it definitely is not something that is here to stay. It appeared, but well, we're going to deal with it, and we're going to make sure that it doesn't stay, right? Because ultimately we need to understand that it is not something that our society has to be tolerating, similar to how we shouldn't be tolerating homophobia or, sexism and any sort of discrimination to a person based on whoever they are with their identity. Racism is also something that we shouldn't be tolerating or putting up with in general, right? So we need to understand where exactly this comes with, right? So basically, when you take racism, it is something that is connected to, our identity, who we are, where we come from, where our birth city may be, right? Or where we are from in the sense of, our roots, our skin color, how we talk, how we behave, because those traits are attached to our race in some way or the other, right? Even when it comes to our accents that we speak with, our accents could be very different from each other's, because, ultimately where we come from decides how we talk as well, right? Because of all these things, we need to understand that ultimately racism is attached to these things as well. Some of us, some people actually get irritated by how other people talk, how other people move, simply because it is different from how they behave. And that is really, really sad, right? And this becomes even more problematic when it comes to an institution, a political, economic or legal institution that decides to discriminate people based on their races, which has been the case in multiple countries. You see people getting harassed on streets, police brutality, like with George Floyd's case in the US, right? Now, if you haven't heard about it, which I highly doubt, George Floyd was exposed to police brutality in the US simply because he was a black person, right? And he is not the only person to be put through this. And when George Floyd's case became very popular, we also saw a lot of other people come out and talk about their experiences. We saw a lot of other black people talk about how their relatives were affected or how their loved ones were affected by this situation as well, which tells us clearly that this is something that commonly happens to the black community in the US, right? And this isn't the case only with the US. We can take racism in the current context with other countries as well. If you take China with the Uyghur Muslims, China has constantly been putting the Uyghur Muslims into re-educational camps in the name of re-educational camps, which has been, putting them through torture to, leave their religion simply because they're Muslims, telling them, look, if you do not leave your religion, we're going to punish you, and putting them through extreme punishment, which has been China's actions towards their minorities. And even if you take other countries as well, there have been many other countries that have been racist towards their population in multiple ways, which means that this is still a happening process. This is still a happening problem, even though it dates back to multiple centuries prior, right? So we will be going into the details of the history of racism, which is going to be pretty interesting, because then we'll be able to understand what the root cause to this problem could definitely be. And we want you to stay tuned right here on Relax Radio. This is Sala from the Social Roundup. Let's just go for a small break.
Climb on Everest. That is that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do, hopefully.
Climb Everest.
Mount Everest. I mean, okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest, maybe the base camp at least.
They're talking about mental health. Well, if you went out and got some exercise in the fresh air, that would improve your mental health. It will make you feel better.
That's true. That is true. I wholeheartedly agree. But then for some people, it's how do you find the motivation to, especially when it comes to riding a bicycle, to do it again and again and again and again? It's a cycle that you have to be used to. How do you do it? What makes you wake up in the morning and decide, hey, I'm going to pick my bike up today. I'm going to cycle. What makes you want to do that?
What makes me want to do that?
Yeah. What do you like? What could you give listeners, like people listening in right now? What kind of tip could you give them?
Well, the first tip I would give them, if you haven't tried it before, try it. It can open up new horizons. It will make you fitter. It will definitely make you fitter. Cycling is one of the best forms of aerobic exercise you can do.
It sounds like, if you think about it, yeah, it sounds like great fun. Because what essentially you're trying to say is also at the same time, when you, if you look at it from this perspective, with regards to mental health, especially when you look at it with mental health, this is another way to fight it. I feel like you go outside, you meet more people, you interact with, socially, you will interact with more people, and you're keeping fit, you're making connections, you're breathing in the good and exhaling the bad. I feel like that's a great thing right there.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got a better way with words than I have, I'll tell you. But you're quite right. What you say there. You're quite right.
I've been doing this for quite some time. Hey, you'll get the hang of it.
I've been doing it for about 10 minutes now, so yeah.
That I can never really understand people staying in one room the whole day when you can have the world to see. I am a traveler. I travel. I love traveling. Traveling is just one of the things I do. And yeah, on top of my bucket list was, to one time, hopefully when I get there, go to Nepal and climb Mount Everest. That is that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do, hopefully.
Climb Everest.
Mount Everest. Okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest, maybe the base camp at least.
Base camp, yeah.
At least.
Would you be able to cycle there?
Oh.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh, so that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" Hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. Got me thinking. You want to stand out. Why do you want to stand out though so much, especially with these kind of shirts when you're riding? There must be a purpose behind it, right?
Well, when you say a purpose, Nick, what I do, I wear the shirts. Mainly one because they're nice and bright, so they make me visible, especially if I'm riding on the road.
Okay. Yeah, that's very important, right? Because you want cars, yeah.
Very important. And also, like, people see me in like calves, and perhaps I shouldn't be saying this on here, I suppose, but in the bar afterwards.
All right.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh, so that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" Hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. You look like a guy who would do.
You know me too well. You know me too well, Nick.
up with Sala right here on Relax Radio. We have been having some amazing discussions right here on Relax Radio 24/7 under different topics that we discuss here. We bring to you different shows and different discussions that we are pushing for as well, right? And if there is something that you want us to talk about, or you want us to, you want to engage with us, tell us your story. We'd love to hear you share your experiences as well. We are talking about something today on the social roundup that needs to be spoken about, which is racism. And if you do have any experiences or thoughts on racism, you have experiences prior, you have experiences before, and it is also something that you have something to say about, do feel free to comment and engage with us through Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and even Twitch. We're right here to share your story and to listen to you talk about your experience and also be here for you. That is exactly what we do here on Relax Radio. Now, talking about racism, we have been also talking about the history, which is what we will be going into next, right? Now, we have a lot of questions as to where this whole racism came from, right? Where did racism actually root from, right? And there are different opinions that have been given by society multiple times in different contexts. So we will be discussing all of them and we will be going into details, right? But definitely one thing that we need to consider is the fact that, we need to think about 5 BC, when in Greek city states were a big deal. Now, for those who have no idea about what this is, trust me, I'm going to take you through this process, right? We're going to get through it, we're going to understand it, right? If you take a history, when you date back to 5 BC, when Greece was, a prominently properly functioning state in which, there were small political units, and actually Greece is supposed to be the only country in which such organized political units and governing bodies were functioning way back in that time period, right? It's only of recent that that sort of governing bodies have come about as part of our system. So Greece was able to do that in 5 BC. And how did they define a state? Now, this is really important because this is also something we need to think about when it comes to racism, right? Greece defined states as homogeneous collections of people, right? So basically, if you wanted to be part of a state or a political unit, you had to basically have something in common with the people within that state, right? Be it language, be it something, be it the culture that you come from, be it what religion you follow. You had to have something in common with them to be part of their population, to be part of that country, to be included, right? Now, on the other hand, if you look at the current context of the world, you would understand that we go as global citizens. We do not go as, one country. And even if we do go as one country, individual countries, individual nations. Even then, you would realize that your population is definitely not homogeneous. You would have people of all faiths, all beliefs, speaking all kinds of languages. And we need to embrace this diversity and not run away from it or get upset about it, right? As much as the homogeneous system would have worked in Greek city states in 5 BC, it's not something that could be implemented as of now. Now, this has been the situation with most countries when you follow nationalism, right? So when you want to feel that pride, like, I am part of this nation, we're all part of this nation, and we love the fact that we're part of this nation, you tend to feel like you need to have something in common with the people who are part of your nation, which is actually normal because that is exactly what has been put into your brain, right? Because they have told you that to be part of a political unit, to be part of a country, you need to share something in common with them, right? Now, with this situation, the problem is that, ultimately, if you were to share something in common with people, what you should be sharing is a piece of land that you live in, right? The fact that you all live in the same country, the fact that you all live in UK together, the fact that you live in the US together, the fact that you live in Germany, or wherever we're going to be talking about as well, right? Or in general, any place, China, right? What should be making you feel united, and the fact that you are feeling this nationalistic feeling, should be the fact that you are all in the same land, within the same land. And to be honest, I'm not someone who believes in that sort of concept. I think we should all embrace a global citizen concept. But it is important to be grateful and happy that you were born into this country, that you were given this sort of protection through your country, and you are being loved and raised within that country as well, right? So we need to be grateful about that, and we need to be thankful for that. But at the same time, we need to keep in mind that ultimately that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to ill treat anyone who looks different or is different to you or is not originally from your country as well, right? So keeping that in mind, we also see multiple other situations in history where this has been the case, where racism has been a prominent factor, right? Let's take Germany for an example. After the defeat in World War I, we see that there was a clear racistic situation in which the Jews were persecuted simply because they were Jews. They were discriminated and they were tortured, and this was the case in Germany, right? And the Holocaust occurred, and which had resulted in a lot of people feeling like Jews didn't deserve equal treatment to the Germans, right? Now we don't not only see this in Germany, we also see this with colonization. We also see this with slavery, with North America, with the Western countries that have been constantly active with colonization. They've always felt that people that they have, countries or nations that they have colonized, or the people that they have included into this whole slavery system, are less than them, right? Which isn't the case, right? And this has been the situation with most countries, right? To the point where it had led to segregation, to the point where you had to have a separate church, separate schools, separate hospitals, simply because you were not part of the same race. And let's not even get started on marriage, right? Which is where the whole scandalous marriage stories come from. Fictional stories of interracial love stories in history have come from, right? And that is because during these times, during these important during these historical events, what has happened is that they have constantly segregated and separated themselves from other communities, right? So we see that racism has been practiced, and in those situations, there were two types of races: the low status races and the high status races. And the low status races basically had to do jobs that were much more low paying, much more, harder, physically exhausting, and they had very less access to political power, economic resources, and let's not even begin with civil rights, right? So they were treated very differently in comparison to the high status races, which had very well, good lifestyle overall, right? There are many more ways that we can watch to understand the situation. There are many reference books that we could read up on as well. Now, if you take the situation with the black people, something that you could possibly watch is the movie The Help. And also with Hidden Figures, these are good movies that you could possibly watch and learn a lot from, because they will tell you the kind of discrimination that the minorities faced within the countries, the kind of trouble that they went through, and how there was different treatment that they had to face simply because of their race, right? Now this shows us that slavery and colonization made the people feel like they're superior to the people who are originally from the nation as well, right? And this has caused them to ill treat them through history. Now this definitely was impacted by United Nations, because we see that ultimately what happened with the United Nations is that they decided to change this, right? And they decided to bring about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, which changed everything that happened so far, right? So until then, Asians, Africans, Jews, you had all these problems happening, and where people were, constantly being discriminated. And let me just say this out loud, right? Now there are certain situations that we have no idea about as well. Now, though these situations are more commonly spoken about, the Uyghur Muslim situation is something that is not commonly spoken about. Or if you take the situation with Bosnia, it is not something that is commonly spoken about as well. Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar is something that is not spoken about. So we need to understand that there are a lot of cases where extreme racism takes place in this world that we do not address, that we do not talk about, which hopefully we will be able to discuss here, right here on Relax Radio. Over time, we will give each of these situations attention, and we will get to discussing them individually as well, right? But ultimately, we need to acknowledge that racism is something that has been happening globally, and it's not something that should be here to stay. It is something that we need to eradicate decade. Now, Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the United Nations in 1948 started to bring forth this idea that, look, you cannot be discriminating people simply because of their race, right? And that's when we started to see a lot of movements among the communities that were being discriminated, that started to question why they were being discriminated, right? And to today, we see these movements still functioning. Still functioning. What does this tell us about the world, right? This tells us that ultimately, even though we have been fighting against this for the longest time, that we haven't been able to address the problem ultimately, right? So we need to understand that ultimately, if we're not going to be taking action to stop this, and if we all don't decide to do it together, then we're going to have to be facing this problem even for the next century, which is really, really sad, because this has been here for the longest time. But if it has been reducing over time, it means that it's not here to stay. So we need to take whatever action we need to take to stop this situation from spreading, right? With that being said, we will be going into where racism comes from, and the unconscious bias within us individually, and how to deal with it, right after this small break. This is Sala with you on the Social Roundup.
Now, there's a lot of conversation around who pays more taxes, if it is the rich or if it is the poor, right? When you are basically going out and during a day, you go to a restaurant, you have to pay taxes there. If you buy a car, you have to pay taxes there. So why is it even a conversation that, the rich pay less taxes or the poor pay more taxes? Why is it a conversation like that?
Because it's true, the rich generally pay less tax. A rich person walks into a Tesco's or a Sainsbury's, they're not going to get a different bill than another person, right? They're still going to pay the same VAT on those goods, they're still going to pay the same thing. So that's all the same. However, the differences come in if you can pay yourself from your own company, you can structure it in a way that you pay less income tax through paying a bit of salary, paying dividends and so forth, and then also deferring income. Also, your pension payments or contributions can be different. So that increases your tax sort of gap, if you want to use it that way. Where a PAYE person just gets paid salary and bonus. And now those are the most highly taxed sources of income in the UK, definitely, in the UK. We've seen it, right? If an owner of a large public traded company does something wrong, irrelevant of what that company does or how valuable that company is, the stock generally falls into a pool of nothing, right? Because in a public company where the stock is traded openly on the stock exchange, the value of that stock is driven by supply and demand, it's driven by emotion, it's driven by news, it's driven by quite a lot of variables over and above the actual accounting or total net worth of that company. I mean, we've seen it, right? If an owner of a large public traded company does something wrong, irrelevant of what that company does or how valuable that company is, the stock generally falls into a pool of nothing, right? And the company may still have value, it may still be doing quite a good thing.
Welcome back to the Social Roundup with Sala right here on Relaks Radio. We've been talking about some interesting topics today, and we have a lot of interesting content coming your way. So do stay tuned with Relaks Radio. And if there's anything that you want us to talk about, do feel free to comment and let us know on Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, YouTube, and also Facebook, right? And we'd love to also have you engage in these conversations with us. So do tell us what you think about the topics and conversations we're having right here. And right now, we're talking about racism, which is something that we've been, avoiding for the longest time within our society, something that needed to be spoken about, but we haven't been talking about. So we did take a look at the history of how racism came into being, and we also looked at the general idea of what racism is, right? Now we're going to be looking at how racism is there within us, how it is internalized, and we have no idea about it as well, right? So if we really take a look at our brains function in a way that it likes to be organized. It likes to categorize things when it sees things, right? So for example, when I'm a kid, if a dog were to bite me, I would have a dog phobia. I would grow up thinking that, okay, you know what? Every dog is going to bite me. That is just how human brains function, right? So if we have been exposed to certain situations where something occurred to us, we would immediately associate that with every other person that is similar to them, right? And it's just how we are, right? Let's take relationships for example, right? When we have someone not treat us well in a relationship, we tend to think that, you know what, everyone is not going to treat us right. No one in this world is going to be loving and kind towards me. No one's going to actually be healthy for me. And then we try to avoid relationships themselves, right? But the truth is, when you break that cycle, when you come out of it, and when you're finally able to, start dating again, you would be able to find a person who is much more different to the person you met earlier, right? So it's very important for you to keep in mind that these biases that we make are just how our brain functions, and we need to change that about ourselves, because our brain is going to categorize and find shortcuts which could be really bad to categorize the people, and then we decide to put all of them into these little boxes, and we say, well, all of these people who are like this are all like this. They think this way, they behave this way, and that's where all these stereotypes come from, right? Which is not supposed to be good for us, because that is not how this world works. Now, when it comes to categorizing things, I think in general we need to understand, especially with people, it's not easy to categorize, right? Now, if you take the subject science, you can simply categorize certain things. You can say, okay, boxes are all like this, triangles are all like this. There are common factors among all triangles, there are common factors among squares, right? But when you take people, something that we need to understand is that people are all different. People are different from each other. Why is this important? Because even when you take subjects like sociology, anthropology, politics, you cannot categorize anything, right? Now, if you were to take a look at sociology and political science as subjects, when you go back to the time period of 1960s and 1950s, there was the behavioral or scientific turn, right? in which people try to say, you know what, we can categorize people, we can put them all in the same box. But the truth is, the behavioral, or rather the scientific approach to political science and sociology was heavily affected and unsuccessful, right? In fact, to the point where we ultimately turn back to the philosophical approach, because we realize that, you know what, political science, sociology are subjects that study people, and people cannot be categorized, and definitely, said that this is exactly what would happen, right? And this is simple to understand, because if you take TikTok, one video could go viral out of nowhere unexpectedly, and even if you were to follow the same strategies in that one video with another video, it's not the same case, right? Or even if you take what people show interest in, there are things that someone would show interest in, and the same factors that made them interested in this particular thing would be the same reasons they're not interested in something else, right? People are very, very different from each other, and they have unique characteristics which would make them have this sort of differences, and we cannot categorize them and say this is what a person is. Now, for example, someone might be a very, very good person, unexpectedly they do something that you're not used to, that you weren't expecting of them, which is the case with humans in general, right? We're constantly doing things that people don't expect us to do, and that is how we are. And this is because you cannot categorize people, right? So this unconscious bias comes from within our brain, because we have made it part of our system to sort of categorize people and say, you know what, everyone who is like this is probably thinking like this, behaving like this, right? If you simply say a statement like all Muslims are terrorists, simply because the situations where you have come across with terrorists have been Muslims, doesn't make every Muslim out there a terrorist, right? So what we need to understand is to disassociate these stereotypes with people, and especially with their ethnicity, nationality, or their color, right? Simply because one person of a specific color did something, or one person of a specific ethnicity did something, doesn't make that every person from that ethnicity or color or background would behave the same way, right? This is pretty obvious when you take a household, right? When you take a household, you would realize that under the same parents, under the same roof, with the same sort of exposure to a household, you would have two siblings with completely different personalities, with completely different characters. Now, for example, my sister and I are definitely very, very different from each other, and this I've spoken about before, right? How I'm an extrovert and I love people's energy, and my sister loves to just be by herself, right? And under the same roof, if you could also have different religious beliefs, which is also the case with our modern world, where you have siblings with different beliefs, partners with different beliefs, then why are we finding it hard to understand that within this world there are people like this with different beliefs, and they, just because all they share a common factor, doesn't mean that all of them are going to be that way, right? If you're under the same roof, from the same parent, biologically of the same upbringing, and you're not the same person with the same characteristics, then why are we associating one ethnicity which is common to so many people around the world to be the reason for them behaving a certain way, right? So we need to understand that these stereotypes that have been internalized into our system, the way we think about the world, has to be changed, and to change it, it's not definitely going to be easy, right? So we need to do whatever it takes to make sure we train our brains to think that way, which we will be going into detail later onwards as well, right? The next thing we need to understand is what has an influence on our racist thoughts, right? Now, one thing that we need to keep in mind is that the household we grew up in definitely has an influence. If our parents have a tendency to be racist towards a certain race and make judgments towards a certain race, that means the chances of you making judgments towards that race is also higher, right? And if you also have friends who are racist towards a certain community, then that definitely also means the chances of you being racist towards that community are higher, right? And this is because you are exposed to it on a daily basis, right? You are exposed to your family, you are exposed to your friends, you are exposed to these communities, which could definitely mean that you are definitely going to be influenced by their thoughts. Now, this is not just the case with your family, friends, and the general society that you come from, not just the neighborhood, or the school that you go to, not just influenced by those factors as well, right? Another important factor that we need to remember is social media. I cannot harp enough on this. Social media and mass media has a great influence on how you see the world, right? And because of this, we need to make sure that we are doing whatever it takes to sort of fix these thoughts and also make sure we are in control of what we are exposed to, what we decide to expose ourselves to, right? So be it with social media, be it with people around you, decide and make sure you are in control of what you are exposing yourself to, because once you do expose yourself to these things, it's going to have an impact, right? Which is why humor is something that you need to think about. Making memes out of racist situations, sexist memes, homophobic memes, you might say it's just a joke, just take it very lightly. But that isn't the case. You cannot just take it lightly and move on there onwards, because these things tend to have an impact. You tend to desensitize the issue simply because you are exposed to, making that joke and making it something lighter than it is supposed to be, right? So make sure you do whatever it takes to expose yourself to content that isn't racist, that isn't sexist, that isn't homophobic, and that doesn't, help, or that doesn't make the way you think any different to how you think right now, right? And make sure you're exposing yourself to content where basically there is anti-racist, anti-racist policies that are being pushed for, anti-racist behavior. Push yourself to read up on how people who have faced racism have felt. Listen to their stories. If you have your stories, do share it with us right now on the comments, and we'd love to hear what you have been facing as well, right? And in general, if you are someone who has had a history of being racist, I just want to say, I know you've made a mistake, right? We've all been there, because like we spoke about this is something that is internally there within us, right? We have been made in a way that our brain stereotypes and categorizes people and how we feel, right? So just because it is there, that doesn't mean we don't have hope, which is exactly why we're having this conversation on the social roundup on Relax Radio, because you have hope, which we will be going into in detail as well. We will see how we can fix this about us. We will see how we can make a change within the system, within ourselves, and then ultimately have an impact on society and make sure that racism doesn't continue to live on, because racism is definitely not here to stay. If we have made an improvement since the 19th century, since the 20th century, that means the 21st century is where we're going to completely eradicate racism from this society, right? With that being said, we're just going to go into a small break, and I just want to remind you that we'd love to hear you give us your feedback and what you feel about this topic as well. Do comment, feel free to comment and engage with us through Facebook, Instagram, with TikTok, Twitch, and also YouTube as well, right? So stay with us right here. Tune in with us 24/7 on Relax Radio, because we have different topics that we talk about, different things that we'd love to talk about with you as well. This is Sala on the Social Roundup.
One of the easiest ways to increase your net worth is to ensure that you have higher cash flows. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to not buy things on hire purchase, not buy things over months and months because you can't afford them now, but you want it. It's kind of that delayed gratification. Rather than buy that couch, that car, that stereo, that computer, whatever item, and pay off over 12, 24, 36 months at an interest rate, rather invest that money, make do with what you've got, and then after 12, 24, 36 months, take the money that you've now invested and buy that good. An asset could be anything that appreciates or reduces a tax bill. So it could still be a liability, but it reduces their tax bill. And I'm not going to go into the technicalities because that's out of our remit here. However, for our use or our purpose, what we are talking for the listeners here is I would put this definition of an asset forward. An asset is anything that increases your income. Anything.
Now, there's a lot of conversation around who pays more taxes, if it is the rich or if it is the poor, right? When you are basically going out and during a day, if you go to a restaurant, you have to pay taxes there. If you buy a car, you have to pay taxes there. So why is it even a conversation that, the rich pay less taxes or the poor pay more taxes? Why is it a conversation like that?
Because it's true that the rich generally pay less tax. A rich person walks into a Tesco's or a Sainsbury's, they're not going to get a different bill than another person, right? They're still going to pay the same VAT on those goods. They're still going to pay the same thing. So that's all the same. However, the differences come in if you can pay yourself from your own company, you can structure it in a way that you pay less income tax through paying a bit of salary, paying dividends, and so forth, and then also deferring income. Also, your pension payments or contributions can be different. So that increases your tax sort of gap, if that, if you want to use it that way. Where a PAYE person just gets paid salary and bonus. And now those are the most highly taxed sources of income in the UK, definitely, in the UK.
Welcome back to the Social Roundup with Sala right here on Relax Radio. We've been having some important discussions right here, and we'd love to know how you feel about them, what you think about it, and we'd love to hear your stories and experiences as well. So do feel free to comment on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitch as well. Engage with us, and we're here with you 24/7 on Relax Radio, giving you the content that you need to be, having with us, the conversations that you need to be having with us, from travel to entertainment to sports to gossip to celebrity gossip to entertainment to traveling and everything that I just mentioned, and much more, to be honest, right? And we also have social issues, current affairs, and crime also that we talk about right here on Relax Radio. So do stay tuned with us 24/7. And right now, we've been having an interesting topic discussion, which is on racism, right? We spoke about the history of racism and how you might be having an internal bias. And we also spoke about what racism could possibly mean and how it can go undetected as well, right? Right now, what we're going to be going into is what could be done. What are you going to do to train your unconscious bias towards, people of different ethnicities, of different colors, and different national origins as well? Number one is be informed, right? You definitely need to think about what experiences people are going, and need to understand how people have different experiences and how that may be influencing their lifestyle as well, right? Why this could be the reason that they're not getting treated equally in this world. So be informed and make that extra effort to critically understand what is happening in this world and how these opinions and stereotypes are constructed. And then also think about where you get your information from. So we spoke about how, you exposing yourself to social media, mass media, the movies you watch, the music you listen to, your parents, your friends, everyone. That sort of information that goes into your brain could really influence who you are as a person. So it really matters that you are in control of what you are exposed to, right? And we also need to think about balancing out your thoughts, right? See your judgments of others like a seesaw, because one side is negative and the other side is positive, right? So when you do make a negative judgment of another person, do also counteract it with a positive one, and make sure that you are doing whatever it takes to sort of balance it out, right? And do this, and you will gradually find that your empathy grows as your negative biases are challenged, and you'll be able to balance it out, and you'll be able to have conversations with people of different ethnicities, different backgrounds, and you'll be able to interact with them and have better conversations with them, and also start to make them feel integrated into society, right? Next thing you definitely need to do is call people out. If you see someone being a victim of a situation, you need to speak up on behalf of them, right? If you see someone being racist towards someone else, just call them out. Now I know this is definitely the toughest thing to do, because sometimes they might be a friend of yours, sometimes it could be a parent of yours, and at times like that, you don't always have to be violent and aggressive when you call someone out. You can say it in a very nice way. It's as simple as saying, wait, do you really think that you should be saying that to a person? I think you should rethink it, right? And it doesn't always have to be in front of that person. You can take them to a side and be like, look, I don't think what you said is right, and I know that right now it's awkward, but you need to apologize to them, right? You need to apologize, and you need to fix this about yourself, and we don't want you being racist towards someone else, because that isn't right? Which is exactly why you need to have the conversation about racism, be it with your parents, be it with your friends, be it with your society in general, right? So make sure you do that, and you are making whatever you need to, you're making the extra effort to call out people, and even in public situations, because this is something that commonly happens in bus stands, in buses, trains, in the roads, everywhere we see people being racist towards the general public. and you have an important role to play as a member of the society. As a global citizen, it is your role to play, and you need to take it very seriously, right? The next thing you need to do is, once you have educated yourself, you need to educate others. So take the time to, post certain posts that you see, or if you see any info slides that are being shared, because these are very common things on social media, do share them and tell people what they could possibly to do to be less racist towards the people around them, right? And surround yourself with people who are different. Tend to have a more diverse background, diverse group of friends that you hang out with, right? Because I'll tell you this, you are a global citizen ultimately. The world is progressing to a place where different people from different ethnicities and racial groups are going to be around you, and you're not going to be in a homogeneous community. The chances of you being in a homogeneous community are very, very less in comparison to you being in a very, very diverse community. So start to hang out with people of different communities and embrace their cultures, and start to appreciate their cultures and their backgrounds and their identities instead of looking down on it. Next is also seek out role models who are part of this community, who speak up for, minority rights and talk about racism, who are constantly engaging in activism and trying to eradicate the problem, right? And don't forget to be empathetic and check your privilege as well. If you are someone who is part of the majority, or you're someone with that sort of privilege, just make sure that you're taking the time to check it, and make sure. Sometimes you might say, oh, I don't see any privilege, I'm not getting treated, I don't have any sort of privilege, right? If you don't see a privilege, that is exactly when you know you do have the privilege, right? Because someone who is being discriminated will clearly know, I am being discriminated. Now, on the other hand, if you're not discriminated and you do have privilege, you won't see the privilege, nor will you see the discrimination. That is exactly what privilege is, right? So be aware of it and make sure that you are not, misusing your privilege, and in fact, use your privilege to raise awareness. Give your platform, offer your platform to people. Like Mia Khalifa on TikTok was offering her platform to the Black Lives Matter movement to raise awareness on it. And that is exactly what we should be doing, right? With the privilege we hold, with the community we hold, with the audience we hold, we need to be raising awareness towards the racist issues that take place in our society, right? Finally, don't stop learning. It really matters that you don't stop learning, and you're constantly making the effort to do whatever it is in your power to make an impact on this world, to make a difference in this world, right? So make sure that you are doing whatever is in your power to fix the situation, and constantly learning and engaging in this conversation. And do engage in conversation with Relax Radio right here, because we are looking to hear out what you feel about these situations as well. Download our app. You can engage on conversations with us on Facebook, on YouTube, on TikTok, on Twitch, and we are always here to listen to you and have that open conversation. You can even call us up as well. So hoping to have more interesting discussions with you. But right now, we have come to an end of the social roundup with Sala right here on Relax Radio. I'm super excited for you to be joining our journey with us right here. So stay tuned, because we have more interesting discussions come up with more different shows that are going to be here with you 24/7 on Relax Radio. With that, we've come to an end. Have a good day. Take care.